Hi everyone, this is an introduction to how to use Adobe Illustrator to take something from a sketch, bring it into Illustrator, use it as a template, and then design something out that will ultimately either be printed regularly or in this case we're going to send this to a laser cutter to then cut these shapes out. So I have Adobe Illustrator open right now. I went down and opened it up with my Creative Suite. This is Adobe Illustrator 2021. I'm going to go ahead and create a new document. Now, in this particular case, I know we're going to be working with 8.5 by 11 inch regular letter sheets of paper. So whether it's points or inches, you can choose your unit of measure. I just switched to inches so we know it's a standard letter sheet. I am going to switch orientation though so that it's horizontal, so that'll be in kind of the landscape or orientation. And we'll go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and create this, and we'll have a new document here in a second. After the rainbow wheel. I don't know why Illustrator takes so long to open up a new document these days, but sometimes it takes a second. All right. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and save this document just as we get started so I don't crash out. So I'm just going to save it to my desktop as laser design1.ai. Save that to my desktop here. All right, cool. Now, you can either like just move, I have mine on my desktop, like here's the image I'm gonna use a template, so I could just drag it into Illustrator. It's really big, you know, then I need to kind of scale it down so that it fits. It's just bringing it in at the resolution. It's a slightly high-res camera that I used, so I can do it that way. Or you can go up to the top of Adobe Illustrator and go to File, and then down to place. They don't really use the word import. I don't know why Adobe decided they had to reinvent the word import like every other piece of software uses, but yep, they like to use the word place. So I'm going to go to place, and then I can find that same image here. There it is, and I can place it. I guess it's because then I can place it. You can say the word like a verb. And if you just do this, you'll notice it's warping the image. If I hold Shift, though, it maintains what's called the aspect ratio. This used to be the standard across all Adobe software. Of course, Photoshop had to change it. So now in Photoshop, by standard, it holds it this way. And if you hold Shift, then it becomes loosey-goosey. So just for extra fun to confuse you if you're moving between Photoshop and Illustrator, right? So here we go. I have an image here. It's in here. I can use it as a template. I could also do this thing which basically allows me to convert it automatically. So I'll show you that first. Because some of you just might want to stop there, and that would convert your shape into what's called vectors. Adobe Illustrator uses shapes, simple shapes, to draw out these what's called a vector shape. And what's cool about these is they aren't resolution dependent, which means they're not made out of pixels. Like the image that I brought in, that's set by like how many megapixels my camera has and what resolution it can shoot at. I can make it bigger, but then you're just doing something called interpolation, where you're making up and you're using AI or basically the software to interpret pixels next to each other. You can only make it bigger than its resolution to a point, and then it gets blurry. We've all tried to take like a low-res image from like Google Images or the web and then try to print it, and it comes out blurry. Well, that's because it's resolution dependent. Now, Illustrator, I can make any shapes I want, any color. You'll see Illustrator can do a whole lot. I can change the color here, do all sorts of things. No matter what, if I scale these really tiny, you know, if I scale them together, if I do this and shrink them down, they'll look nice and crisp on a business card. If I make them giant, they'll look just as crisp on a billboard. And the reason why is they're made from math. If you actually hit Command, if you're on a Mac, or Control Y on your keyboard, this is called outline mode, and you can just see everything like its shapes. And you can see like that circle is made out of 4 points. If I actually click on them, you'll see they have these little Bezier handles that I can manipulate. And so it's just basic geometry, you know. And same thing here. These are linear points. If I click on one, they don't really have the handles because there's no curve involved. But anyway, I can still manipulate them. I can hit Command Y again, or again, you can go up to View and hit Preview, and it goes back. So you can either go Preview or Outline mode. Preview gives you like the full color preview. That's most of the time what we're going to be working in. But sometimes being able to go up to View and Outline will help you find lost vectors that are hidden in your composition, hidden behind things, etc., etc. I'm going to delete these two shapes. So the first thing I'm going to show you is something called Live Trace. So Illustrator has this ability to take a raster image, something made from a camera or from pixels in Photoshop, and convert it to vectors. So if I go to Object, and there's Live Paint and Image Trace. We're just going to do Image Trace. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up Make. And just if I do that, everything is done kind of automatically for me. I don't really want to do that. So instead, I'm going to go up here to my window. And these are all your various palettes and toolbars. You'll see mine are already set up with some of my favorites on the right. So I have color, gradient, swatches. I have my brushes. I have stroke, which is basically like line widths on shapes, gradients, onward, 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 onward. And I believe image trace, I thought I had it in here, but maybe I don't. So I'm going to go to Window and bring up the image trace window. And if I want this to, it can float as a pop-up, or I can bring it down here and actually add it. And then I'll always have image trace that I can open up as well. And image trace, if I do it this way, I just have a few more controls of what I can do. So I can trace, and this is giving me a preview, right? Particularly if I unfold the advanced function, then I get a lot more in there. Threshold is the main one you're going to play with, so you can see what happens if I give it less. The preview will update. I get less of the image. If I do more, I get more of the image. It's a little too much though, right? I'm getting the background as well as the foreground. So I'm going to bring that back to somewhere in the middle a little bit. I don't want it to be too little, too much. You can see there's limitations to it. It's really, that was better. You know, now I've got a little bit of a better shape, but you can see, like if I zoom in on this, even though it's going to make a vector shape, they're kind of sloppy looking. You know, they're not clean and crisp. That might be what you're looking for though. I can turn on a little bit more here. I can increase my corners and get a little bit better shape to it, just a little bit. I can try to reduce noise a little bit, some of these little bits up in the corner. The paths, I can go and let them have a little bit more accuracy to them. So if I increase that, it'll bring in a little bit more, but then I also get some noise that comes with it. And I can also turn on Ignore White. Will make it so that I only am left with the black shapes and not the white background. Otherwise, I'll have all the white background as well. And, you know, if I like what I've got here, and I like this, that's cool. If I do Command Y, though, you can see it's still pretty much a rastered image. I can also choose between grayscale and color, but for most of you, we probably want to just stick with black and white right now. And once I've got that, you know, you can play around. There's a few presets in here that you can try. You can try outline and see what that looks like. We'll just take a look here. It's taking a second to do it. Probably shouldn't have done that. Then it gives you an outline mode. That's not going to work as well. There's black and white, which we had before. There's grayscale. This is going to give you way more information than you need, so I'm just going to stop on the grayscale. I'm going to go back to the regular and see what we get again with these regular settings that I've got right now. Give it a moment. Oh, it's in color mode. That came out accidentally from the last setting. We don't want all the color, but it will actually turn your stuff into a vector. So like there's a vector color version of it, which could be cool. You know, you've got your orange shapes and your yellow and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go back to black and white though. There we go. And I'm going to try to bring that threshold up just a little bit. Get back to where it was. There we go. That's close enough. Now, once I like what I've got, I can then go back up to Object, Image Trace, and Expand. And this actually turns it into vectors now. It's a big group, but if I go to Command Y, you can see it's all made up of a bunch of points in space, different shapes. Not the easiest thing to manipulate. So, you know, you could take this and I could make the laser cutter or a printer print this out. The laser would follow every single one of these lines. It would take a long time, but it is possible, right? Or you could come in here and try to pick out individual shapes. So I could see how I can hit Command and I can click on individual shapes, and then I could change that one to magenta. And I could come in here and I could put this one to orange. You know, there's lots of possibilities of what you want to do. By default, this whole thing is grouped as one big group. If you want to ungroup, you can go to Object and go to Ungroup or Command-Shift-G. And that will do the first layer of grouping will disappear. So I was able to delete that shape up there. And then I can grab these and delete those. I don't need them anymore. And then you'll see each one of these is now its own separate object. If all of this is grouped, you can do Command-G, and then it gets grouped, and then you can move it around as a group so they don't get lost. Or you can go to Object and Group. If you ever want to go into a group, just double-click it, and then you'll see I have all of these individual pieces inside of there, right? So that's a group. This is an individual object. These little rings are individual objects. Unfortunately, there's some white shapes that are in there too. I guess I didn't have the ignore white on. So we're going to have to do some work to get rid of those white shapes that are in there, but that's okay. So if I click on this guy and change the color, you'll see I can make that whole thing orange. Except this one, which was somehow its own free floating, probably because it just didn't touch the boundaries of the other ones. And then I could make that one. But everything else, like if I wanted to change these other ones, I'd kind of have to recreate them, because as you can see, like if I zoom in on this guy, it was just slightly connected there, so it kind of became part of the whole thing. So we'll keep working on this, but I just wanted you to have some basic ideas of what you're working with here. Now, my other option is I could just recreate this in vector and have much crisper lines. They wouldn't look as hand-drawn. They become more geometric, more an abstracted version of it, but could be cool too. So this was one option, the live trace, and you can kind of manipulate it however you want, right? So I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to go back again. Let me go out of my group here. This is another way to navigate your groups. Up here at the top of the page, there's like layer 1 and no objects. I'm going to kind of go back here, okay? So I'm going to go back to File and Place again. Oh, where is it? Why do I always... There it is. And there's my image again, and I'm going to place it, right? And let me scale this down again. I'm going to hold Shift so that it doesn't get all warped. If you want to zoom out too, you can zoom out with your mouse scroll wheel. You can also use the magnifying glass to zoom in and out, whatever you feel comfortable with. So I'm going to zoom in on this. I'm going to close my image trace window. And I want to show you layers first. So right here is a little button that says layers. If you don't have that button, just go to Windows and activate layers, and you'll get it in a pop-up. And you'll see I can, if you've ever worked in Photoshop, you'll know it works in layers. I can create a new layer, which then I can build things on top of this layer. And if I don't want to have to constantly like bump into this layer, I can hit this little guy and lock it. So now I can't move that layer. It's just sort of like a background layer that I can use as a template. If I want to hide it, I can turn off visibility with that little eye icon. And then I'm going to click on layer 2, and I'm going to start to build this. So I'm going to use these for my main toolbar over here. You'll see there's lots of stuff in here. There's my selection tools. There are these little pen tools where you can kind of free draw things. There's a type tool if you want to add text. There's a line tool. There's shape tools. We'll start with some shape tools. So I'm just going to show you how I could recreate these shapes, right? So I could come in here and say, I like that, but let's make it orange, okay? And if you want, you don't even have to give it a fill. You could do something like this and fill it with an edge. And you could change, that's the stroke. And you could make that a thicker stroke if you want. That's maybe a little too thick, but I'm going to go like that. Now the only downside of using the strokes, they look fine in Illustrator. If you're going to save this as a JPEG or another image, it's going to look fine. But if you go to laser cut, the laser can't tell the difference between like just a fine line shape and that line thickness. So if I wanted this same kind of like donut look, I wouldn't do it this way. I would actually have, I would just give it a solid fill. Oops, I did it again. Let me turn that off. I would go to this one right here, and I would give it a solid fill of orange. And then I would actually subtract one image from another. So I would copy this one, go to Edit and Copy, and then Edit and Paste in Place will put it right back in the same location. And then I can shrink this one smaller. Maybe I want it like about that big. If you want to see what it's going to look like in preview, I can make it white. And then I can take that shape, hold down Shift, and select the shape behind it so they're both selected. And I can go to this window and go to Pathfinder. And Pathfinder is a cool little tool that will subtract one from the other. So whatever's in front will be subtracted from whatever's behind it. So this little -1 here, this shape, these two will merge the two. This one will subtract. So if I do that, now I have a donut shape where that inner circle was subtracted from the outer circle. So now that I have that, I can either copy and paste again, Command C, Command V. So if I Command C and Command V, it'll just paste sort of in the middle of the document. If I Command C and Command Shift V, then it pastes in place. And then I can come around and place these in all the other locations that I want. So I'll copy and paste. Another quick shortcut is if you hold down the Option or Alt key on a PC, you'll see how a double arrow, then you can just drag out another copy right out of the original. I find that to be the fastest one when I'm doing something like this. And almost done. And there we go. Now I'm also going to do my big outer circle, right? So I'm going to use that same method. Now, a cool thing you can do with circles, I could come up here and try to like draw out the perfect circle. If I hold Shift, it'll maintain. If I don't hold it, then it turns into an oval, right? So I want to hold Shift, and I could kind of scale this to where I want it. We can always change its size later if we want. The other option I can do is with that same circle tool, if I hold Option down and click and Shift, Option and Shift, I can make it come out from the center. That's kind of a cool way to do it. And then I can see the edges. And then I switch back to my selection tool. I can either move it by hand. Whoops, let me back out of that. I can either move it around by hand like this, or I can use my arrow keys to tap it into place. This will take it little micro adjustments. Arrow keys are really important for micro adjustments. So I'm going to copy. I'm going to go to either Edit and Copy or Command C, and then Edit and Paste in Place or Command Shift V. And then by holding Option and Shift again, I'm going to shrink down and make another version of this. I'm going to hold down Shift and select both the front and the back. Just to make this easier, I'll make this one white, the one that was on top. Hold down Shift and select the one behind it as well. There we go. Now we got them both. And I'm going to use that Pathfinder again, and I just subtracted one from the other. So what you see if I go to that outline mode is that there's an inner shape and an outer shape, an inner shape and an outer shape. That allows the laser cutter to follow both of those. So first it'll cut the outside, then it'll cut the inside, right? Which is kind of cool. And then you can place those in your composition later. So Command Y again to go back. And now I'm going to take my oval tool, and I'm going to make one of these first guys here. So I'm going to kind of eyeball this, and you'll see I can come up here and rotate it, right? And this one I didn't have to hold Shift on because I wanted to make more of an oval. And I'm going to try and get my placement just right. So let's see if I can get that right. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then I'm going to widen it out just by pulling the shape out. If I hold Option, it'll pull out of both sides equally. That's pretty good. And these ones, I know I have them in outline in my drawing, but I think I'm actually just going to keep them solid. So for this one, I can use this little color picker tool, the eyedrop tool, and actually try to match my color, which is kind of cool. Oh, this is my Mac. I don't usually use this computer for Illustrator, so I hadn't done this in a while, so bear with me. Sometimes to use a color picker, Apples want you to... There we go. I've turned that on. It won't be available till later, but whatever. So now I've got that going. If you want to kind of see how it's placed too, right here there's a transparency button, or you can go to Window again and Transparency. But I can open this up. I can temporarily change the transparency just so I can kind of see through and still see my drawing underneath. That can be really helpful sometimes. So I like that. I'm going to go ahead and drag out a copy of that and place that one here. My drawing wasn't perfectly symmetrical, but this can be. You can see even just by pulling it along, I'm kind of like snapping it along an angle. And then if I want to, I can copy both of those. I did Command C, Command Shift V again, and then I'll rotate these. So even though my drawing wasn't symmetrical, doesn't mean I can't have a symmetrical design. So something to think about. I'm going to bring in another one here. I'm going to do kind of actually, I'll just duplicate one of these. So I'll bring this into the center. And I'm going to shrink that down and rotate it into place. And somewhere in between these two, I'll probably end up with a more symmetric design than my original drawing was. So that works. Now I'm going to go ahead and do these shapes here. Okay, so same thing. I'm going to bring this in. And this time with my color picker, I'm going to pick this kind of golden color. I don't know if I'll stick with these or not. The laser cutter, I'm ultimately not even going to have the colors. I'm going to be able to, my colors are going to be based on what kind of paper I have to cut these out of. So I think that looks pretty good. Just so I can get my placement, I'm going to change its transparency down a little bit too. I think that looks pretty good. And since I'm going to cut these out of paper with a laser cutter and stack them all on top of each other, I can decide what order they're in. If I want to preview what that's going to look like in Illustrator, I'll show you in a minute kind of how to move these around. But I'm going to Option drag or Alt drag that one out again. You could always do copy and paste and try to get that kind of lined up. There we go. See how that little pink line shown that they were in alignment? And then I'm going to select, copy, Command-Shift-V to paste in place. And then I'm going to rotate these around as well. And obviously I can tweak these. They can either try to be a really symmetrical design or not. If I go to my layers and hide this, we can see what it's starting to look like. Because sometimes it's confusing to see it with the top layer. So maybe these guys need to rotate a little bit more. Maybe they need to move over a little bit. We're getting some pretty cool symmetry here. All right, cool. I'll put this background layer back on. Now maybe I'll do a little shape on top of this one. So maybe I'll just duplicate it. So copy, Command-Shift-V again to paste it in place. And I'll do another one, but this one I'll make like a dark green. There we go. And I don't need transparency on that one. I'll just bring it back up to full color. And last but not least, I'm going to try to do one of these little inner shapes that's going on as well. So let's see. I kind of have a border of one on top of another. So all of these, I could just select them all. I'm holding Shift to select them all. Copy, Command-Shift-V to paste on place. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just do one. Copy, Command-Shift-V. I'm going to bring it in just so I have kind of like an equal border. I'm going to bring the transparency back up on that one. And let's make this kind of a, I don't know, for right now, maybe a light color like that. And I'll just check. I think I'm a little like longer. Yeah, if I want to have equal borders, I'll do something like that. I think that looks pretty good. And now I'll go ahead and fade that back a little bit just so I can see through it. And then maybe I'll do one more inside of that. So copy, Command-Shift-V, and I'll shrink that in. And this one I'll give it, again, kind of an orange vibe. That looks good. And then if I want to do that kind of like twist through it, I totally could. I could create a little shape. So this is where a pen tool can be really fun. Actually, I'm going to do the one above it. Excuse me. And what I'm going to do is kind of create a little S-curve through it. You can click and drag out these little handles. And then I'm going to kind of make it go all the way through. And I'm going to close it by just clicking on that original one. It doesn't look very good, so now I'm going to manipulate it a little bit. If I come up and choose the white handles here, I can come in and actually change some of these angles a little bit and play with those Bezier curves, right? It's kind of hard to see because that's also pink. Let me change the actual color here to something easier to work with. There we go. And then we can see how those handles work. I'll change it back to something else later. There we go. Now we can actually see the handles a little bit better. So if I turn them, you see how they become kind of linear. There we go. I think that's fine down there. If I move this little guy over a little bit, I'll move that over. You can start to see how you can really manipulate things at like a granular level in here, which is fun. Ultimately, I'm going to take this shape and kind of cut it out of this purple shape, right? So now I'm just going to take that shape. I'm going to hold down Shift, select the shape behind it. I'm going to go back to my Pathfinder tools, and I'm going to cut it out. And now I'm left with that cool little like curve through that shape. It's not exactly what my original drawing was, but I still kind of like it. So I'm going to roll with it. So now I've got this shape, I've got this shape. I'm going to select them both by holding Shift. I'm going to group them by doing Command-G or go up to Object and Group. And now that they're grouped, I can go ahead and copy and paste. So Command-Shift-V again. I'm going to rotate it this way, come down here and place it. Let's get that nice and lined up. That looks good. And then I'll grab both of these, copy, Command-Shift-V, and rotate them in place on these. I think this one's going to need a little better placement. That's not too bad. There we go. A little tweak because I just don't have perfect symmetry going on. And one more, we're going to do something like this shape that's inside the green one. So this one I'm going to do totally by hand with the pen tool. I'm going to go ahead and click out a line there. I just clicked and dragged. This is called outline, and the pen tool can be really, really powerful, and it just takes a little while to kind of get used to it. Less is more with the pen tool. Let's just say that. So I'm going to click here, pull out a shape, click there. You know, this looks easy because I'm doing it, but it really does take a little bit of practice. And again, if I come over here, eventually you won't be able to see the design underneath, so I'm going to make that semi-transparent. And I want to be able to kind of bring a little more symmetry than my original drawing had. So I'm trying to match my points on the other side. Whoop, undo. And then I'm going to connect back to that one. And what's cool is while you're going, you can hold down, like I've got my pen tool, but if I hit the Command or Control key, I can quickly get the like white arrow, but still go back to my pen tool. And I can move things around how I see fit. And then if you hit Option, you get this little like caret tool, which allows you to manipulate just one handle at a time. It's kind of an advanced feature, but I like to show people that. So that's kind of cool. And then I can take maybe a circle here, and I'll go ahead and manipulate this. I hit V on my keyboard to get that. Kind of rotate this into place. Not too bad. And I'm going to bring that on that. And then I'll probably just copy, Command-C, Command-Shift-V to paste in place again. And we'll bring that into place over top of it. And I know these colors are all wrong, so let's bring this back to like the dark green. And then I think I'll do this as that color. And this one I'm actually going to cut out of that one. So I'm going to do the Pathfinder again. There we go. So now I've got that on top of that. You know, I could keep tweaking this particular shape. I think it's not quite there yet. You know, if I grab that one and bring it down, I can bring a little more symmetry with the other side. And same thing here. I think my curve is off a little bit, but whatever. It's close enough for right now. So I'll go ahead and hit V to get my main selection tool. Hold Shift, grab both of those. I'm going to go ahead and group it into one group. And now I'm going to copy, Command-Shift-V, and rotate it. And then I'll bring this and kind of center it up in this guy. And then I'll take both of those, copy, Command-Shift-V, and rotate those into place. And those actually don't look too bad. I'm going to hide my back layer and start to see what this is looking like. Cool. Yeah, actually not too bad. All of this is still in like a transparency mode, so I'm just going to select all. I did Command-A or Control-E to select everything. You can also just like drag a bounding box around everything. And I'm going to come up to transparency here and just make sure that all my transparency is 100%. And now we're starting to see, so like this guy probably needs to be a slightly different shape than the other, and I can see it's like not perfectly, or I'm sorry, a different color. So maybe I will choose, if I just choose that, I can come in and click on that and change that to say maybe a lighter green. And I can do that for the rest of these as well. And if I hold Shift, I can get both of these at the same time, use my color picker, and pick that. So now we're starting to see all my vectors, right? If I want to bring this to the front, there's a couple ways I can do that. I can either copy it onto a new layer, so I could hit Command-X to cut it. Oh, actually, I want to grab both of these first, so I'll group them. Oh, and Command-X to cut it, and then Command-Shift-V, and I'll just kind of paste it in place on top naturally. And then I'll maybe like tap it over a little bit. You could also cut it and put it on its own layer. So I could do like layer 3 on top of here and Command-Shift-V. Ultimately, everything with a different color, when we move to the laser cutter, you're going to want to put each different color on a different layer anyway, just to make it easier to cut these out. But for right now, I just kind of want to show you what's possible inside of Illustrator. Like I can already see that this is off a little bit, so I'll kind of move this over here. There we go. This might have actually been an easier design to just kind of rotate the whole thing from the beginning and turn some rulers on. You can always go to View and turn on rulers. I used Command R to bring up the rulers, but that's how you can bring them up. And then with the rulers, you can drag out little guidelines. So if I know this is 11, I can put 5.5, there's a guide, and 8.5, then I would go 4.25. And that's kind of the center point of my design. Because then I could have had everything lined up like this. If I rotate this, I could kind of bring it in that way, which Command Y can help you with too, just so I could really get symmetrical with this whole design if I wanted to. In this case, I'm okay with it being a little bit asymmetric. Whoop, I didn't mean to bring all my guides with me, but I can grab this guy then. Oh, my guides, hold on. Let me lock my guides. There we go. The guides were part of the design there for a second. So I could tap this up and really get it in the center of my page. So hopefully I just hit Command S to save. As you go, make sure you're saving a lot. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can get from something like this to something much cleaner and solid shaped and, you know, abstracted a little bit inside of Illustrator. And then we'll take something like this and we could print it out on a regular printer, a laser printer, an inkjet printer, or we can go to something like a laser cutter. So, you know, if I'm going to go to a laser cutter, then I'm going to take all of these individual shapes. Right now I have it grouped, and I'm going to make a whole bunch of layers for each color. So the orange would be on its one color, and that's easy to do. It's really not too difficult. I can basically come in here. If I turn that off, I've already got one layer going anyway. So above layer 3, I would basically just put in a couple of layers, and I would come in and start choosing some things. So I would probably come in and ungroup everything first to begin with, and then I would just hold down Shift and select a whole bunch of stuff. So I would take my orange background layer and grab these guys, and then I grab that outer ring, and I do Command X to cut, and then I go to my first layer and Command Shift V and paste it back in place. You know, then I'd go to these guys. I think those are the only ones with that particular brown. Command cut. Oh, looks like there's something in there. And then Command Shift V. Don't worry, we'll put this layer. You can move your layers up so that they're always on top of each other. I think these guys are actually still transparent for some reason. Let's grab those real quick and bring their transparency up. There we go. And back to layers. We will cut. So back over here. Whoop, didn't mean to do that, sorry. Hold down Shift and grab each of these. Command X to cut. Next layer. I don't think I have anything on that one yet. Command Shift V. Then I grab these guys. Again, I'm holding Shift to do these groups. Cut, Command Shift V, and then these ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go to layer 7, Command Shift V. Get these guys, 1, 2, 3. Cut, Command Shift V, and last but not least, actually I guess these guys needed to be on one behind it. Let's put that on that one, and then we'll move that behind layer 8. And these guys are kind of already there on their own layer. Those ones, those ones, those ones. I think those are all the same color. Let me double check that. Oh, those guys still have their transparency on, that's why. So let's bring those up. I did that group all, but I guess it didn't grab them all when I brought all their transparency up together. So there we go. Now everything is on its own layer. This will make it really easy to separate these layers into separate files and to cut each one out of a separate piece of paper or to print them separately and do whatever you want with it. All right, that's my lesson for today. Hopefully that wasn't too much in one. We'll be following up, and lots of great resources online that I'll have links for as well beyond my lesson. Thanks for tuning in.